Oh, the preschoolers are always going to be enrolled because their parents are getting an opportunity to get them out of the house. So right now, some people are not happy with the virtual, you know. Well, it is what it is. Camille's school is still, she's doing virtual, but they're still giving you an opportunity to come in Monday, Tuesday, virtual Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday.
Hmm.
We're just gonna go pick that laptop up, the iPad up tomorrow, and take that ID and come on back home.
And they're not charging the students for the laptops, right? What type of agreement are they making the family sign?
With Gary,
Yeah.
well, I signed a form yesterday. Um, yeah, I signed a form. So I guess that's what the parents do. They sign forms.
So if the
But
laptop is
Camille's
lost or
iPad
damaged,
goes to her.
if it's lost or damaged, how much are you don't know?
No, I didn't. I didn't because I got the iPad mainly because they send emails. And as I told them, I'm not hooked up to them and I'm not going to send Gary's uh, emails to Gary Community School Corporation's emails to the city of Gary's equipment. So give me your laptop and I'll keep it on and I'll be able to view your emails and everything. But like I said, right now I still can't get into it. So it's not doing any good. I still had to go on my own devices to see the information to this. So but yeah, every kid is supposed to have a iPad or a laptop, and those who don't have internet supposed to get a hotspot as well. And I think they're supposed to start lunches, food pickup again tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, how are they doing that? Are the parents picking up the meals like it did this when COVID first started? Just take home a week worth of
Yeah,
meals, or okay.
yeah, they have buses that have bus stops that you stop at and you come pick them up.
Hey, did anybody go to Ty's weekend piece? I couldn't make it this weekend.
I went. I had a table.
How did it turn out?
It was wonderful to have Oh wow! Are we really sitting there being recorded right now? Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking because it's going on. It's being recorded, and we're just being listened to.
Oh, yeah. Let me shut up. Let me mute myself.
Is anyone on the call on the planning committee, Cozy or Dwight? Ty? Godwin? No?
I'm here. This is Ty. Cozy's also on the call. He's on the committee as well.
Okay. So I don't know if Councilman Brewer has internet service or anything, so
The start time is
we can
5:30
continue.
though. I don't know
Oh,
if
is
you.
it?
Yeah, that's in
Yeah,
8 minutes though.
5:30. So that's why I was wondering why it was showing this hour live.
Yeah, it's live, and yeah, the meeting has started and broadcasting on
But his start time is actually
Facebook.
5:30.
Okay. Well, that's real soon, so maybe you all between the two or three of you all decide who's going to do the meeting if Councilman Brewer doesn't make it.
Brewer will be on. He's going to do it from the council chamber.
Hello?
We're here.
Hello.
Hello?
It's not turning. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Councilman Brewer.
Good evening.
I gotta mute my phone.
I wonder what's going on with my camera. Once you get back, we'll be ready to get started then.
Attorney Williams had a limited amount of charge on his telephone, so he said he may be able to get back on, he may not.
Okay.
Mm.
We're good on time? We're good? Okay. All right. At this time, I would like to call the Planning and Development Committee meeting to order at this time. This is August the, time is on. 11th, yes, August 11th. We're starting at the 5:30 p.m. We have several ordinances before us and one resolution. I'll go down the list at this time. CPO 2020-39, amendment to the Community Benefits Agreement Ordinance sponsored by Councilman at Large Flores Lay and Mayor Jerome Prince. CPO 2020-41, an ordinance amending Chapter 123 entitled Zoning Code of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Gary, Indiana, sponsored by Linda Barnes Caldwell, Planning Commission, Petitioner Spectacle LLC on behalf of Windy City Acquisitions LLC to vacate alley east and west of Black Oak Garden. CPO 2020-42, and an ordinance amending Chapter 123 entitled Zoning Code or of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Gary, sponsored by Councilwoman Linda Barnes Caldwell and the Gary Planning Commissioner, Petitioner Spectacle Entertainment LLC on behalf of Windy City Acquisitions LLC to vacate Calhoun between South 8094 and north of West 29th Avenue. We have a resolution, CPR 20-2011, a resolution of the Gary Common Council confirming resolution number 2020-07 that established and dedicate a certain area of the city of Gary, Indiana, the Broadway Loft Economic Revitalization Area, to which deductions from assessed valuation may be requested by an applicant of the Common Council of the City of Gary, pursuant Indiana Code 6-1.1-12.1, sponsored by Mayor Jerome Prince and Councilman at Large Ronald G. Brewer, and the Gary Redevelopment Commissioner and Gary City Office of Community Investment. At this time, we have several members of the council that's here with us. At this time, I see our Vice President, Councilman William Godwin, and Acting President also. Cozy Witherspoon of the 1st District. Cozy Witherspoon of the 2nd District is also with us. Linda Barnes Caldwell of the 5th District is with us. Councilman Dwight Williams of the 6th District is with us. I see our attorney, Renzo Williams, is with us. Cloris Lay, Councilman at Large. Councilwoman Ty Atkins of the 4th District is with us. Did I miss anyone? Council members. Don't see Councilwoman Mary Brown, but she will be joining us shortly. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I would ask that we would take these out of order and that we will start at CPO 2020-41. And we will come back up to CPO 2020-39 will be our last resolution, our ordinance that we will speak on. We will start at CPO 20-41. It's sponsored by Councilwoman Caldwell and the Gary Planning Commission. Is anyone on from Spectacle also?
Yes,
Yes,
hi,
I think,
Attorney Karen Price, and we have
Hi.
Ron Ziegler, who's also on, Rich Ziegler, who's also on the line.
Okay, how you all doing this evening?
We're great, thank you.
Okay, well, we're
Very well, thank
giving an overview for us this evening.
yes, I'll do that. This is City Attorney Rodney Pohl.
Okay,
With 2020-41 and 2020-42, these were ordinances these were essentially replats that went to the Planning Commission, and as part of that replat, there was a petition for the vacating of an alley and the street, as listed in both of the ordinances. These are the casino adjacent properties. The Planning Commission has reported it out as approved with the replat, and in addition to that, the approval of the vacating of those both the alley and the street on Calhoun. So I believe if there's anything, Rich or Karen, is there anything that you wanted to include in that? I mean, that's essentially the overview of the ordinance and what the what it ultimately does.
We don't have anything further.
is there any questions on CPO 2041? And I believe both of these are pretty much the same for 41 and 42, correct?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Councilman Lay.
Okay, because I'm doing it from my phone. I was out of power,
Okay,
so I don't know whether you can see me, but as long as I can be heard, that's fine. Okay, thank you.
okay. I was able to see you, but now I can just hear you. I do understand about the power. That's why I'm sitting in the chambers now myself. I'm out of power also. Is there any questions by any council member at this time for 2020-41 or 2020-42? I'll just say we do both of those in tangent because there's a vacation of both streets there.
Mr. Chair, this is.
Yes,
Okay, so just to confirm, it's only asking for approval for the vacancy of those properties, right?
this is the street here.
Yeah,
One is the alley,
Yeah.
yeah.
The alleyway, and just making sure that they are granted permission to do whatever demo is needed.
Yes.
Okay. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, there's no other questions by any other members? All right, thank you all. I will go to the next resolution, CPR 2020-11. Wait, this might be you too, Mr. Poe.
1 second, I'm pulling up 2020 CPR 2020-11, which is the confirmatory resolution.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the follow-up. Essentially, the council had previously enacted or passed the declaratory resolution for the Broadway Lofts, the ERA. What this resolution essentially does is confirms the previously passed declaratory resolution. That is essentially the full effect of what this resolution does. I believe we have Pete Schweikert on the line as well. Pete, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Mr. Schweigert, did you have any update for the council as it pertains to the the progress with Broadway Lofts and the any progress that you've made since?
Yeah, can give you a quick update on the development effort. As you were aware, I think it was your second meeting in July. The first meeting in July, we were in front of council requesting approval for the the declaratory resolution for this tax abatement. Broadway Lofts, as discussed then, we were hopeful to get closed in July. with the confirmatory resolution, we had to do some public hearings and the notices, and so we have gotten those in place now, so that that confirmatory resolution can come back to council for potential public hearing and council action on August 18th. Since those meetings, I have been trying to work with Councilwoman Atkins and administration to coordinate the neighborhood meetings that had been discussed in the previous council conversations. We do have that scheduled now. Initially, we were going to do an individual meeting, but I believe there is an Emerson neighborhood larger neighborhood outreach meeting that a few of the council members wanted to do, and so we're going to present as part of that larger neighborhood effort, and we're going to be presenting our efforts not only for this phase 1 development, but also the phase 2 development. With that, we also made some commitments that we understand and acknowledge going into phase 2, the potential of the community benefits agreement in its existing form, and certainly understand and acknowledge that in those future phases, we're going to be addressing that and meeting those commitments as we move forward with phase 2. Phase 1, we still are here in a situation where we're at the finish line on a bunch of commitments and financing sources, and unfortunately, this week we received, I should say last week, we did receive some bad news that $300,000 that was committed to the development unfortunately got pulled last week. So we are fighting an uphill battle and trying to make the gap sources fill and leave the development in a closable transaction. We found some ways to do that, but with that, it only makes this potential tax abatement ever more important. We're still planning the same development, same parameters, all the same commitments of quality, 38 affordable housing units for the workforce, 4,000 square foot of new leased commercial space with active businesses, net zero building design, and community benefits. From the standpoint of the definition itself,
Did we lose you?
I think we lost Pete. You're back on mute. I think you.
yeah, sorry, I think I hit the keyboard there. Just to run through our perceived community benefits, and really, if you look at your community benefits agreement as it stands today, it specifically notes affordable housing as one of the goals of the community benefits agreement. So we are providing these 38 affordable housing units that are going to preserve and assure affordability long term for the community, and super high quality affordable housing. So that in itself is a big community benefit. So we're hopeful you'll see and recognize that, as well as all the special features, the greenhouse, the car share, all the things that I have gone over, and I'm happy to go into further detail again. All total, around $400,000 worth of new community investment and benefit back into the community because of this development, beyond the affordable housing, which totals over $8 million in itself. And so we're hopeful that you'll see that those aren't just pre-created or predetermined community benefits. This process started with a workshop over 3 years ago where members of the community participated and derived these as good goals and good components to the development to make sure we are having a bigger and greater impact on the community. And with some of the loss of resources, we really are struggling to do more than these $400,000 worth of investment that we're already making. And so we're hopeful that'll be enough. And with that understanding that with phase 2 and all the future phases, that this stuff can be properly cooked in, and we would intend to 100% provide all of these benefits and whatever the community benefits agreement might pertain to. And in fact, that's why we're having this meeting on the 20th, so that we can not only reintroduce folks to phase 1 that we're discussing tonight, but also introduce the neighborhood to phase 2, so we can start listening to them about what they would want us to do to provide benefit as part of phase 2. So with that, I'm certainly hopeful that the community's interest and excitement about this project continues. We can get closed this month, and that's super imperative to us to try to get closed soon. We're facing a few things. Number one, cliff dates and deadlines with the funding. And number two, if we don't get closed in August, we could risk winter conditions with construction, which then further exacerbate the gap source because we're going to have to put more investment into dealing with construction during winter. I'm certain I haven't answered all your questions, and I'm certainly here to answer anything that I haven't gone over for you, and certainly hopeful that this can go to council with favorable recommendation and get approved at the next meeting so that we can stay on pace for a closing this month still. And if that was the case, you would start to see mobilization and construction out there as early as September.
One of the things, I'm sorry, Chip.
Go
Chair,
ahead.
one of the things, if I could add to in this process, I know Mr. Bowditch, one of our financial consultants that works with us on these tax abatements, is on the line as well. But one of the important parts of this process at this juncture right now is the fact that we had the petitioner has to send out 10 days notice prior to the public hearing of this actual confirmatory resolution. So in trying to schedule that, we had to get it on the August 4th date in order to ensure that it would be it would be before the council for potential passage on the 18th in order to in order for the petitioner to have enough time to give that prior notice of that 10-day notice. So it had to go out by the 18th. That all has been taken care of. So they are set for that. I think that is one of the important things that we had to note as far as where we are in this process and why it's being put before the council at this point.
Can you, Pete, go into a little bit about the phase 2? You spoke a little about it. Can you talk to us about what we will be expecting with phase 2?
Yeah, phase 2, there is a funding opportunity through the state. The application deadline is September 18th. And similar to phase 1, we can apply for funding to bring new, high quality, affordable housing to the community. You may remember from my previous presentation, our initial concept was this multi-phased, multi-generational housing development that would serve various needs in the community. So phase 1, workforce housing, Broadway Lofts workforce housing, targeting young professionals and small families and singles, 1 and 2 bedroom units. Phase 2, Broadway Homes, which was submitted to the state last year for funding, and unfortunately we did not receive funding. We did have city support and Gary Redevelopment Commission support in that application effort, but we just fell short. We're hopeful to resubmit that. And what that development proposal was is a 52 unit scattered site lease purchase townhome development. So it'd be 52 total units. The lots are scattered in the Emerson neighborhood, really between Broadway, Virginia, 5th, and 9th, kind of the eastern quadrant of downtown there. So that is the target area. That will, kind of the goal is that this could spill some of this investment in Broadway Lofts, which is in the corridor, spill that investment out into the neighborhood and start to bring some new opportunities and development into the neighborhood. So with these lots, we'll have townhomes. They'll be lease purchase townhomes. It'll be a mix of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom townhomes. Now you can see we're trying to serve the larger family in the community and the starter family with a product that is, again, fully accessible, green in design, energy efficient, brand new, a product that's really been lacking Gary for a decade now. And with that, the great feature is that while it is affordable and while it is rental, it is also has a lease purchase component where at the end of the 15-year lease period, the resident can purchase the home at cost. And we can go into that detail further if you desire. But ultimately, it allows renters to turn into owners and brings families into ownership sooner. And so we think that's a great benefit to the community to foster and encourage further ownership. So that's what phase 2 would be. We would use the tax credit funding to bring that forward. And our goal at this neighborhood meeting is to really present the multi-generational concept of what Broadway Lofts is, phase 1, what Broadway Townhomes would be, phase 2, and then also what Broadway Senior Lofts could be when we would possibly come back for this third phase of the development to complete the multi-generational concept, which we would hope could come forward as early as an application in next year's funding round through the state.
And then I heard you talk about inside of phase 1, you talked about the community benefits agreement about putting the facility up, and that was a big part of the agreement. But what about far as the demolition? I mean, the site prep work that has to be done. What about some of the building opportunities? Have you all configured any of the contractors locally that can work on any of those projects? I may understand that you may not be able to fulfill everything of the community benefits agreement, but what things can you fulfill inside that agreement?
Yeah. Well, there is good local participation as it's bid. That'll include Gary participation, City of Gary subcontractors, that is, as well as MBE, WBE participation locally, as well as a substantial portion of the workforce that's not Gary-based, being Lake County and Northwest Indiana-based contractors. So there is still strong participation. We still are committing to the local hiring component of Section 3, and that additional new hires, our team will be working to fill those new jobs with local hires, and we have made contact with a few of those groups that are going to help make sure that those new jobs that are created, that local labor will have opportunity and access to that. So we are trying to make those efforts in addition to, say, the community benefits that we're making. With that, though, also understanding that these weren't components that were ever even brought up or contemplated in phase 1. We are 100% committed to those in phase 2. We have already identified our phase 2 contractor. It's going to be Powers and Sons. It was a local Gary-based general contractor. They've already reviewed the CBA as it stands, and I know that there's possibility or a potential amendment to that. But the basic structure, whether that be living wage rates, whether it be MBE participation percentages or Gary City sub participation, they've informed me that they're highly confident that they can perform and achieve all of those going in, and so we're hopeful that will also be taken into consideration as some of the things that might be lacking from the existing community benefits agreement that we're trying to achieve still. Understanding that these weren't even things that we could have been aware of or known of just because the agreement didn't exist. And so hopeful maybe some concession can be made so that we can get this one across the finish line. And that said, we've even made some commitments or expressed some willingness that we could possibly do some additional community benefit as part of phase 2, because we could contemplate and prepare for that going in, if that's helpful as well.
And
Mr.
have you
Chair.
identified your general contractor for phase 1? Have you identified?
Yeah, they were actually identified as part of the initial RFQ process to the state. As mentioned 3 years ago, when we applied to the state to secure this funding, we needed to identify our partners, and that included the ownership partners. That's us, as well as Community Action, Northwest Indiana Community Action Agency. And then we were identified as the development team, and then we also had to identify our property manager, which is MBH Property Management. We also identified our general contractor at that point, and that was BWI, who was an MBE contractor who was involved with moving forward phase 1.0. So they have a lot of familiarity with the special features of this development. And that's why at that point in time, we had identified them as part of the development team. So they, in partnership with city departments, put this out to bid in the fall, again, before the community development agreement existed. And we're basically ready to sign the contract and let all of the work, which again does include Gary-based contractors and union-based contractors. But ultimately, we can't do so until we finalize these sources and get ourselves ready to close.
Okay, thank you. I believe I heard Councilwoman Caldwell.
Well, that was Atkins.
Atkins. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Atkins.
I had two questions. So
I'm losing you, Councilwoman.
can you hear me? I'm
I
in the
can
car.
hear you now. Yes.
I'm sorry. So I had two questions, Pete, related to phase two. So the first question is, you said that Powers and Sons were identified as the prime. Was there an RFP process or a bidding process that was implemented for the primes to be awarded?
No, in tax credit development, a developer simply identifies the contractor they want to use. There's no RFP process required as part of a tax credit application. The reason we've moved to Powers and Sons is, number one, our teams really determined they do have the best connection to the local subs and familiarity with Gary processes. And so that was really our key reason for anticipating the transition from phase one to phase two.
Okay. And my second question, you're saying that it will be tax incremental, I think is the phrase that you used. So I'm assuming if we're saying like there will be adherence to the CBA during phase two, then that means that there will be a proposal for the council to accept a tax abatement for phase two. So at this part, do you all have the dollar value?
We're losing you, Councilwoman.
You can't hear me?
Yes, now much better.
Well, I'm sorry, y'all. It's AT&T. I ain't got no internet right now. So the question is, there's going to be tax incentive funding. I'm assuming.
We're losing you again.
That's my question to you. Hold on. Can you hear me now?
No.
All right, hold on. Look at your chat.
What is the dollar value of the tax abatement? I believe that was the question there.
Okay. Yeah. She's a faster texter than I am.
As for phase two, what is the dollar value of phase two?
Yeah, I'll try and summarize just to kind of put them in respect to each other. So from a total development cost, phase one is anticipated, I think everybody's aware of, about an $11.5 million development, and that's for 38 units. And so that is going to equate to over $300,000 a unit. And you can imagine the development cost there. It seems pretty high, but passive house design, all these features really amp up the cost in that type of development format. These will be the highest quality units really in the state, even, let alone Northwest Indiana. With that, we're requesting a 75% tax abatement, which is roughly, depending on the tax calculation, going to generate around $400,000 to $600,000 worth of tax savings. This is phase one, and I know her question was related to phase two, but it's to try and put it in proportion or relativity. In phase two, the development of about 52 units is going to probably be more near $12.5 to $13.5 million, maybe even a little more, the more units. But while they're even bigger units, they'll likely be less expensive than phase one because while we are doing some very high energy efficient things, we're going to be doing enterprise green building standard. It's not nearly the same as passive house and solar. So ultimately it will be a little more investment, 11, probably more like 12 to 13 possibly. With that said, we are another component of scoring and getting the award from the state is local incentives and local matching dollars. So we do have a proposal in front of administration that would include some commitments of some home dollars possibly, as well as a potential tax abatement. Now with phase two, we're only requesting a 50% abatement. So there is a little bit less of an incentive anticipated for phase two. We were hopeful, and the 75% came out of the previous administration's kind of desire to help show the state their initiative in wanting to secure that award. So for phase two, 50% tax abatement, I'm going to estimate that that's going to generate a local tax benefit of around $350,000 to $450,000 in economic benefit.
Okay.
That also means, in theory, we're generating $350,000 to $450,000 worth of new tax increment as well at a 50% rate. Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I guess the next question was asking when will we be able to see the funding source for phase two?
Well, we would apply just like we did last year to the state. The application goes in September 18th. Last year, the city provided a commitment letter, a support letter to the development. So the administration had provided a support letter with an offsite, with a commitment to provide a certain level of local resources or local incentives, basically equivalent to what I just stated, a allocation of potential future home funds in addition to a 50% tax abatement. And that was getting us 3.5 out of 4 of the local scoring points. So it was a impactful economic incentive to help us capture these scoring points that are crucial to bringing the project to market. So we would apply in September 18th. And at that time of application, in theory, we would be hopeful that the administration would provide a similar support letter to what was provided last year, which would contemplate the use of potentially some home funds in addition with a tax abatement that, if awarded, we would find out we were awarded from the state in January of 2021. So we'll apply in September, find out the results in January. Once awarded in January for phase two, we would then come back to this council to more formalize that 50% tax abatement, just like we're doing with phase one now, which would include a declaratory resolution and a follow-up confirmatory resolution. So those would, in theory, the tax abatements themselves wouldn't come back to you until we received the funding from the state and we're able to then step forward towards the closing. So that would be find out late January, early February, and possibly be bringing phase two's tax abatement back to you as early as April or May of 2021.
Okay. And the councilwoman just requested that you would keep us in the loop of those commitments that's being made also by the administration early on before we get to this point.
Sure. And as of now, by the way, we haven't formally requested anything of administration. We've just noted to them that there are local incentive scoring points and that the previous administration had provided some commitments, and we're hopeful that they'll consider commitments similar to that because they were impactful and helpful to our development efforts. So I will do so as we communicate that further. I think that ultimately they'll want to be hearing your input as they might deliver that letter, knowing ultimately the tax abatement would have to come back to you. And so we are hopeful, though, that you'll support a 50% tax abatement for that development as well. It will bring a much needed new investment and really hit some highly impacted areas as we can kind of get out into the neighborhoods. I think it will ultimately help the redevelopment commission drastically as well. As you may know, they have, and AJ might speak to this better, there's as many as 1,000+ lots sitting in the redevelopment commission's hands where these neighborhoods have hundreds of other lots ready for reinvestments. If we can get some new homes built, it will hopefully help attract others to the neighborhood and other types of for sale and rental product to the neighborhood as well.
Okay, all right. And you spoke earlier about a community meeting being held. Do you know when that will be taking place, or are you looking to?
Yeah, I'll let Councilwoman Atkins confirm, but I will say that I've been indicated it is going to happen August 20th from 4 to 7 at the Art House. And I believe that 4 to 7 period is for a larger, broader Emerson conversation. And if I'm understanding correctly, we will be part of a presentation as part of that. And Councilman Godwin or Councilwoman Atkins, am I on the right page with that? And I apologize if I'm not.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so that is correct, except for the time, Pete, and I did get your email, and I'll respond to you and make sure that Councilman Godwin and CC'd on it as well. So the date is Thursday, August the 20th. It is from 4 to 6. It is at Gary Art House. In addition to NVH partners, we will have additional community partners who are nested inside of the Emerson area on site as well to engage. So it is a targeted Emerson approach. However, it is open to anybody who is interested in coming and engaging. And so, yes, Pete, to your point in terms of being able to present information, we definitely want you guys there with displays, showing the developments and being able to articulate what the time structure is, and then being able to take questions from residents if they occur.
Absolutely, not a problem. And from there too, our hopes are is we can maybe get some direction and feedback on what investments might be best made as part of a future community benefits agreement as part of phase 2 as well.
Is there any other question, council members? Okay. Oh, one last thing. I know we did talk at the last time, we talked about some funding going towards the EDC, and we was doing the first part of it. They said it wasn't appropriate to deal with it at that time. They said we would deal with it on the confirmatory side. I believe Mr. Poe had led us to this point here, where we need to deal with that during this time here.
That's correct. And that would be, I believe you're referencing the imposed fee. If there was going to be an imposed fee. Obviously, that per the Indiana statute, that is a option that the council has to impose up to a 15% fee. And I believe it was Councilman Godwin that had pointed out that they had sought that amount be imposed, and that or that a amount, I should say, be imposed, and that it would be that those funds would be directed to the EDC. That is something that is, obviously the option of the council. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's been more discussion about that since.
So how does that work? I have never seen it done. Well, maybe I have, but it was just already done already. But at this point here, the council is actually engaging the fee at this time.
It's my understanding. I don't know if it's been done for a while. If the imposed fee has been done, I think that there's, and I can't speak for sure. I can't confirm this for sure, but and to tell you the truth, I hadn't been involved with very many of the previous tax abatements that had occurred in the years prior. But to tell you the truth, I'm not sure whether or not that has been imposed for any of the developments or any of the recent developments. So,
yeah, the only one that stands out right now is TMB2. Stands out to me, and Superior Trust also, since I've been on. Councilman Godwin.
Yeah, so I would ask, what would that be mathematically? 15% of what?
Is that a question for me, or is it?
Yes.
Councilman Brewer, this is Dan Bowditch.
Okay,
if I can answer that
Okay.
question.
Yes, Dan.
So to respond to the earlier question about the application of the imposed fees, typically all the resolutions for approving a Form SB1 in the past 3 to 4 years have included an imposed fee on it of 15%. So that would include Alliance Steel that was approved in 2019, TMB Tube, as you did reference, as well as, I believe, Kaplan Trucking, Superior Truss and Panel. There's a few other ones that I'm just going off the top of my head, but they have been imposed at 15%. Now, to answer Councilman Godwin's question, the imposed fee is 15% of the realized tax savings from the abatement. So what happens is the auditor calculates what that realized savings is from the assessed valuation deduction applied. And then they calculate 15% of that. They forward that by statute to the Office of the Lake County Treasurer, and the Treasurer applies it and confirms it and then manually bills it. So the auditor would manually bill the property owner who is a recipient of the tax savings. So as an example, if tax savings was $10,000, you would receive a manual bill from the auditor through the assessor for $1,500. And then normally we monitor those, and the auditor will tell us when they send those out and then who pays them. Because if they don't pay them, if the property owner does not receive or make payment on the imposed fee in a timely manner, what happens is the auditor will let us know, and I'll let the city know, and then you can and you can by resolution claw back and say you didn't meet the conditions of the abatement. So it's 15% of the realized tax savings.
So just to follow up, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So were we saying that the Lake County Treasurer would write a check to if in this SAS Economic Development Corporation? Is that how that would work?
So what happened? Yeah, exactly. So whichever economic development entity you direct those funds to be distributed to, in this case, the Gary Economic Development Corporation, the auditor, the treasurer would identify the fee. The auditor manually bills it, and then the treasurer would receipt the dollars, and then the auditor distributes it, because the auditor always distributes tax increment or tax levies for distribution twice a year. But in this case, when they receive the payment, the auditor then distributes the funds to the identified and designated entity in the resolution.
Makes sense. So it's important that the resolution has the proper contact information, address, phone number, et cetera.
Yes, normally what would happen in that case is the auditor would contact the city, or in this case, because I'm working with the auditor to make sure it's filed, when I meet with them, because I meet with them after to make sure they have every resolution in the approval process, they understand what key number it's applied to, so that in this instance, I would make sure they have the contact information, the address, contact information, phone number, executive director, as well as email addresses, so that that imposed fee is directed to the correct person. And in addition to that, Councilman Godwin, it's the auditor, Office of the Auditor also copies the city controller, and so that the city controller knows that the imposed fee was assessed and paid, as well as distributed.
Thank you. And just real quickly, do we know what's your estimate of what the assessed value post development? I know it's probably very low right now, but what are you, for your own purposes, I know there was a chart we saw earlier in terms of the assessed value.
I did supply, and I have to apologize, I'm on vacation and in the car driving, so I don't have that in front of me, but I did submit to the city and the council a one-sheet summary that showed the impacts as well as the estimated assessed valuation of the project. Now, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the project is estimated to be about a $12.5 million project, and we've estimated the assessment to be about $6 to $7 million.
Gotcha. So 15% of whatever that savings is. I think the first year it's almost 100%, right? Or it is 100%. Then it
Well,
continues
it's
to go down.
75% across the
75,
board.
and then goes down
Right.
as the 10 years progress. Okay. Thank
No,
you.
it's only.
It's 10
yeah.
years, right?
It's 10 years, it's 75% each year, though.
75%.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
So
It
you
doesn't
take
reduce over
75.
the.
It doesn't reduce, yeah.
Right. And it's all in that one-page summary. So you know, Councilman Godwin.
Perfect.
It shows
Okay.
the percentages and the abatements total. Yes.
Sounds good.
And
Thank
if you need that, I can forward that to you.
Sure, but drive safely.
I'm not driving. My wife is driving.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for that.
Go ahead and
I
forward it then.
appreciate that. No,
Thank
no,
you.
no. It is illegal to have a phone in your hand in Indiana and in Illinois. So she's
That's right.
driving.
So is that document also included in this packet here? Because I don't have all my information with technology being down on my end.
I believe it is. If not, it should be, and I will forward it to you to make sure. I will get it to Attorney Pohl, and he can forward that to you.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other
Oh,
questions?
you are welcome.
from members? Good evening, Councilwoman Brown. Councilwoman Brown has joined us for the record. Okay, if there's nothing else, we will be done with CPR 2020-11. Thank everyone. We'll go to our last one for tonight. That is CPO 2020-39, the amendment of the Community Benefit Agreement, sponsored by Councilman Lard Flores Blay and Mayor Jerome Prince.
Did you want me to speak now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me clear up some. Well, apparently the council seems to be in the dark as to what I'm talking about, as well as this committee. First of all, one of the committee members, and I'm getting it from the paper, and it's sort of where I'm trying to memorize something. They say I've taken control of the situation. Let me attempt to be clear to the council. The section 2 is what I have an interest in. And what I want to do, and another gentleman, I guess he's the Pastor Mosley, say I'm taking something away from the people. Well, of all the people engaged, I've been elected 6 times, lost 3 or 4 very close races, and have never had a person with a patronage base to support me. I'm very proud of that. So when I say give it to the people, I'm talking about citizens of Gary that would want to serve on the committee, just like any other committee they would apply. I've been told several times about this long relationship with Miss McCready. We don't have one. I might have been introduced to her by Cherry and Judy Cherry somewhere around 1995. I don't even know what school she went to, whether she's from Gary, whether she graduated from a high school in Gary. I know relatively nothing but documents that I have read where she is the CEO and agent. Certainly I disagree with that. Under no circumstances would I put over this committee. So what I've been trying to do is to shift in section 2. I'm not changing anything else in the CBA. I have never, in spite of what you may think, Mr. Brewer, I've never sent you a piece of paper at all. I will be sending one, at least to Corporation Counsel when I received it. I am still awaiting a letter from the Internal Revenue Service. I should receive it before the next meeting, and I will turn it over to Corporation Counsel. It seems to be confusing when I tell this council anything. So again, I'm talking about section 2. I'm merely saying the council does not have any control. Now, for some reason, maybe it's something else I'm misunderstanding. The people, and I think President Godwin sounded like he said we were going to appoint these people without resumes, without interviews. In fact, MCC asked me, and I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Brewer, Mr. Godwin, and of course, President Brown is not here. They asked me for my resume, and I turned it in to them. Now, I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning because of a light outage. So I may not be speaking clearly plain. I just simply believe that anyone that wants to apply should turn in a resume and be interviewed by boards and commissions. I also believe that there's a difference between a page program and the mayor, the executive of this city being given 3 appointments. That's not a fight I will die on. I just think it makes more sense to try to have cooperation. I guess Dr. McLeod, who I have talked to her once she became a member of the Urban League, I'm not trying to control anything. I'm not looking for power. I'm already elected. I simply believe that the council should take control, not Gloria Slay. And as it may seem, I'm not sure I even have the number of votes to take control of anything. So basically, I want Section 2 changed. And again, like I say, I've been up pretty much all night, where we, in fact, whatever number you guys want to create, I thought 11 was a good number. There's nothing magical about 11. I just think it should be odd. People would apply. We would announce it just like any other position. And I remember the other night, President Godwin said for a guy to get a janitor's job, it was necessary for them to submit resumes. So certainly, if they're going to be over the money, which I don't think they should be the Gary City Council should be over all dollars and ultimately release all dollars to be paid out. As far as someone getting jobs with the union, you need to have the union to certify the program as an apprentice program. We have been training African Americans since 1952. I was involved in that. And we got nowhere in terms of the union structure because it wanted legacies. It did not want African Americans in the union. And it may not even wanted Mexicans in the union. So with that, I'll answer any question on Section 2.
Okay, but there's a number of amendments that was brought. So
No, I say that's the mayor. That's the mayor. I said, that's what I'm saying. They're getting you guys confused. I said Section 2.
Okay.
It's a joint. It's a joint request to amend. Attorney Poe will address any other questions. I'm talking about Section 2. Okay. I'm the one that is being attacked in the newspaper. You're the one who said you was going to have a meeting, and I just want to tell you, there is no private meeting in government. All meetings must be public meetings.
All the meetings?
No, when you initially started. I told you I wouldn't attend the Monday meeting because that working session is, in fact, a committee meeting. That's what it is. I knew that.
But
I just decided I was going to let you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
It must be.
Yeah.
I think initially it sounded like people thought it could be private.
No, it was never going to be private. It was always going to be public.
Well, you were advised that you couldn't do it that way now. Come on.
I was never going to have a private. But let's deal with Section 2 at this time.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Councilman Lay is talking about Section 2, talking about the number of committee members. I believe he has a number at 11. And he also would like for those members to be interviewed and go before the planning commission. I mean, boards and commission.
No, board and commission, not the planning. Board and commission.
I just corrected myself. Boards and commission, yes.
If I could, Mr. Chair, really quickly, I want to point out, and I don't want to speak for Councilman Lay, but I know that he did discuss a potentially amending the amendment to include that the members would be City of Gary residents as well. Councilman Lay, was that still your intention?
Yes. We've been talking off and on. Yes, in other words, we shouldn't go to California to get someone to handle to do stuff here at Gary. We got probably 1,000 people could do this. We just got to give them the opportunity to do so. Yes, they should be a Gary resident.
So, Ms. McCready, I will ask if you would chime into here. At this time, how many members do you have, for the record, currently on the CBA? And how many members are residents of the City of Gary? You're muted, Ms. McCready, you're muted. You're still muted. There you go. But I can't hear you though.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I can help. They all can apply, all 16. She got 16 members here. They can all apply. With their resumes. I'm not trying to restrict any of them from applying.
Carolyn, there's a microphone in the bottom left corner where it says mute. If there's a red,
Well,
just click on it.
no, she's not muted. I just can't hear no sound from her now. Well, she's muted now. You just muted yourself. Well, while Carolyn is getting her sound together, can someone tell me how many members, any of the committee members?
I can tell you, 16. I've read everything. It's the number of committee members. They're not in the corporation now. Let's get that straight. These are 16 people that Ms. McCready, as I understand, appointed to be on these list of committee members. All of that was sent to the council.
While she's
including
working
me.
on it, let me make something clear. Ms. McCready did not appoint any of us. We are volunteer community activists. We are leaders in the community who came together over years to try and make sure that developments in Gary would provide jobs and income and training for Gary residents. So we are
Who's
all
speaking?
part-
Who's speaking, Mr. Chairman?
This
Ruth
is,
Needleman.
yes, Ms. Needleman is speaking.
Who's speaking?
Ms. Needleman is speaking. Ruth Needleman is speaking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Needleman, yes. Okay.
Can you
yes.
continue,
didn't
Ms.
know.
Needleman?
Well, all I'm saying is that we are volunteers. We have all been part of doing this. Carolyn has provided some good leadership and organization. She is not acting alone, nor is she acting for us, rather as part of us.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I think your attacks on her are uncalled for.
I'm not attacking. I'm not attacking. I'm simply telling you what's on the corporation. You need to read it, Dr. Needleman. The corporation has one person as the CEO agent, has Attorney James Dillon as an interim attorney. You're not there. Nobody else part of this. So if you're saying me contradicting her is attacking, then I am attacking. I'm contradicting you on section 2 also.
Fine.
So, Ms. Needleman, so there are 16 members. How many of those are residents of the city of Gary?
As far as I know, we're all residents of Gary.
Okay.
And have been for a long time. I don't think all of us were born here, but that would be a strange requirement.
Oh, I wasn't born here either, Mr. Chairman. I've been here 77 years, though. Be 80 as of the 1st of September. 78 years as of September. I wasn't born. I was born in Mount Bayou, Mississippi, an all black town.
All of the members of the coalition have been involved in the Gary community for decades. And one thing is the incorporation papers for the 501c4, but that is not the coalition who's been working together this whole time. And sometimes new people join, sometimes some people step back, and certainly neighbor people, wherever the development is, would step forward along with council people from those areas to be part of this committee. The problem we have, I think, is with the city council appointing and thereby, in a sense, controlling the oversight and the community participation. We would like to see people come forward from the community of the council person in that area. And so the actual numbers of people would vary with different projects. but a core of people would help provide coherence and consistency. I hope I did that, Carolyn, okay.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, again, all I'm asking for, all 16 individuals here could submit their resumes and be interviewed. I'm not trying to get anyone out of being on this committee. I think the entire citizens of the city of Gary. I have never had a developer give me $1 in politics, nor have I ever had one that I know of to vote for me. I am only talking about citizens of Gary, period.
But I would, if I may, Mr. Chair, if there are 16 members and only 11 slots, and that means at least 5 people who at least purportedly are working with the group would not be able to be members.
That's true.
Yes. I would certainly prefer that all those who have been working with it, absent some extraordinary issue, be part of this appointment. And as I said earlier during a committee meeting, I'd be willing to support at least section 2. I have reservations about other parts of the amendment, but at least section 2, if these individuals were named within that amendment. That's all I'm going to say.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I disagree with. I'm glad President Godwin said that. He's talking about appointing people that I have no idea who they are. No idea who they are. I don't even know. The only person I know on here where they got their degree from is Dr. Needleman. She went to Brandeis at Harvard. The rest of them, I don't know if they have degrees. I don't know where they come from. It's only 3 people on this list that have ever been elected in Gary politics. That's Representative Reagan Hatcher, Attorney Rebecca Wyatt, and Senator Melton. So I've been here, and I've been elected more times than all of these people collectively. I absolutely will not appoint people that we know nothing about.
Well, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Well, I want to be clear. I will say a few things. I'm sure I have taken votes on people whose resume I did not view, but I took the advice of the committee chair of boards and commissions. And sometimes, of course, the folks have never physically appeared before us. But secondly, I would say that the spirit of a community benefits agreement is not so much about degrees and having held elected office. I think it's really about one's commitment to the community, one's proven presence in, engagement in, investment in, interest in the community. We aren't looking for this person to be the redevelopment director, the economic development director for the city, or a lawyer for the city, or even an elected official, because certainly we know that we have elected officials who don't have a bachelor's degree. So we can't begin to set up criteria that are beyond what even some of us have. Number one.
Well, I wasn't doing that, but I tell you what I will do, Mr. Godwin. If you produce 2 people on this committee that even beat my little measly performance in this town. I mean, just my performance. I wasn't talking about degrees. I said, well, at least we get that in the resume. Why did you, the other day, you said a person applying to be janitor should turn in a resume to be a janitor.
I don't deny that I said that. I don't recall it.
I'm not talking about they got to be attorneys. I'm not talking about that. But we don't know anything. You may know, maybe they're all first district residents. Maybe that's one of the reasons you want them all, and you know them all. I don't. And even when boards and commissions came before us, I have asked Councilman Barnes Caldwell, could you bring them so we could see them? But I went along with it. But I thought we should at least see them. So since we've been Zooming, I've been coming on, looking and listening as to who was being appointed. And I made votes based upon that. And no one came to the committee that didn't have a resume and come here for an interview. Why can't they do it?
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Why can't they do it?
Councilman Godwin.
Yes, well, I want to be clear. I don't think we want to get into a comparison of ourselves
Well,
with
I am.
folks who
I
could
am.
be-
That's you don't want to do it.
Okay, well,
I
I
do.
said I. Well, I'll say
Well,
I don't want to get
Oh,
into
okay.
the comparison. I think that misses the spirit of committee service. I mean, everyone brings a different skill set, different level of experience to the table. And I would certainly want a committee of this kind to be representative of the diversity of experience, background, geography, et cetera, that's represented in this city. I don't have a problem with asking, and I think we have, that the resumes of those who would like to serve be given to this body. I think that's fair to ask. We are going to have people
Interviewed
who are
also, Mr.
Well, we're
Interviewed.
Mr. Lay, that's your request. Let Mr.
Right.
Godwin continue with his, but that's your request. I want to hear his point of view.
Yeah, I thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. I would just simply say that for my purposes, their presence, those who've been present and engaged, obviously we know some of the elected officials that are on that list, but those who've been present and at least submit some resume or some desire to be part of it, I accept that. And let me be clear, I agree with the spirit of what Councilman Lay is doing. I do think it needs to be an orderly process. I do think we have to, you know, we're talking about money, and we're talking about government, we're talking about accountability, and we're granting things and requiring things, and we want to make sure that we have some connection to what's happening. What I don't want to see happen is that those who have worked to create this community benefits agreement, which I understand from talking to Mr. Pohl is novel in the state of Indiana. I don't think there's any other city in Indiana that has a community benefits agreement. So this is sort of a new thing, certainly for us, but would be for the whole state. So I think we want to honor those who have worked to create this, and I don't want to jettison them in this process, and I don't think that's necessary, but I don't think it's unfair to ask that they indicate in writing some interest in it. I'm not sure we need to necessarily do individual interviews, but I do agree that we need a process. But I think this is a very unique situation in terms of how this has all transpired and the fact that this is transpiring in the middle of a deal, as it were, right? So some of these changes are obviously time sensitive, given that there would be a developer who has an interest in how we make decisions on this amendment. So we're kind of moving very quickly. So I want to honor order, but I also want to respect those who have worked with this committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to leave. I've been informed that my lights are back on. So whatever the council decides, that's fine. Again, I've given you my amendment, my position, interviews, and the submission of resumes. And I appreciate that I may have taken more time than I should have, but it was important to me. And I assure you, I've given over 50 years to this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other council members on section 2 at this time?
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Atkins.
Councilwoman Atkins.
Councilwoman, I'm sorry. Yes, you are a woman. Yes, Councilwoman Atkins.
I just only think about section 2, to Councilman Godwin's point. He's brought some relevant points in terms of structure, and I agree with that as well. When I first read the ordinance, that was my first thought about structure being implemented. But I also want to ensure that we create requirements so that we are inclusive going forward as well. So this initial group that was here is a great group of, community citizens. They have amazing backgrounds. But I'm concerned about whatever stipulations in terms of the requirements that you are having people have to adhere to, that we make sure that it doesn't knock anyone out because they don't have a certain degree or they don't have a certain background of, whatever, to some of the points that Councilman Lay was speaking of. So I just want to make sure that the language there also, is not so restrictive, so that someone who, might not have that defined educational background, but genuinely wants to commit service to this community can still be a viable candidate when it comes to reviewing opportunities for them to sit in this particular coalition or group.
Any other council person on section 2? Only thing I would say, when we talk about the membership, I do believe that all the ones that have participated, and I am agreeing that they should be Gary residents. The number now is 16, so there needs to be an odd number. My amendment would be to take the number to 17 to make sure it's an odd number in place.
Let me just, Mr. Chair, also add
Yes.
that I think we would want to have at least one person from each district.
Okay. So the number is 17 and each, at least one member from each district.
Mhm.
And so just to confirm, I don't know what the amendment, I don't have it in front of me, but did the change identify going forward, like how the term, like how long do they sit as a part of it? Is it 4 years? And then
Yeah.
how it's 4 years?
Mr. Chair, I can answer for Councilwoman.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
sorry, Marty, I don't have it in front of me.
No, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I do. So it is each member shall serve a 4-year term. And these were, to Councilman Lay's credit, these were the terms that he had come up with. In order to stagger the terms of the commissioners for the inaugural group, at the time he had appointed, we had stated that there would be 4 commissioners would serve and 4 of the commissioners appointed by the council and 1 of the commissioners appointed by the mayor would serve a 2-year inaugural term, basically splitting that group. So you would never have an entire, there would never be a possibility of an entirely new group because of just that disconnect in the
staggered.
Yes, yeah. So there would be a stagger of, it would be 4 years, but half of the first group would be a 2-year term. There would be no limit for the number of terms that a commissioner could serve. And each commissioner would serve and be replaced at the discretion of the authority that appointed the commissioner. And then, that would be, I think that would answer, I should ask, Councilwoman, does that answer all your questions?
Yeah, and so it's to basically remove the existing 501c4 organization and create a new board in a sense, and then have the board be instated as the individuals or the members of the board be instated as commissioners with those requirements that was just articulated. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know if you were asking the question.
Yeah, that's the question. So it's to establish a board under the council, remove this 501c4 as having any direct association with the CBA, but we're creating a new entity under the council, and we're going to make the individuals that are members, commissioners of that particular board with the requirements that is stated in section 2 that you just reviewed.
Okay, so that is the directive. Am I to understand that is the entire council? That is the directive of the council, that's how it's going to be drafted? Because it was my understanding that it was going to create the process where there was ultimately going to be an interview process, but that they were moving it to 17 members so that all of these members could become those, could sit on this commission. Or is it that the CGCBA is just essentially being placed as the inaugural commission?
Yeah, so that's my question. I was trying to clear, because they're already an entity. So we're saying, okay, the entity itself will not be associated with the CBA. We're going to create a new entity under the council so that the council can have the authority, in terms of the oversight, I should say. And we're just going to utilize the members of the 501c4 to be a part of this new entity as commissioners under, this new board that's going to be created under board and commissions.
Okay, so here's the next question that I would have from the administration standpoint. In the current version of it, it was 11 members, 8 of which were appointed by the council, 3 of which were appointed by the mayor. Are we going to, is that essential? And the president would be appointed by the president of the commission would be appointed by the council. The mayor would select the vice president. And I know that there was also discussion of possibly the commission members themselves picking the vice president. going forward, if the proposal is that the 501c4 as is would replace, it would be that inaugural commission going forward, then what are we looking at as far as numbers for those picked by the commission versus, or by the council versus those picked by the administration?
I mean,
I
that's,
mean, are we,
that's a
are,
question.
yeah,
That's a good, yeah.
are we going essentially by, because the set, what is, I'm trying to think of this percentage wise, 8 and 3, you're basically doubling. So I mean, then it would be, if it's 16, let's see, another 4 and 13, 4 and 13, or 5 and 12 would be essentially roughly somewhere in between there.
5 and 12. Did you carry the 1, Rodney? You sure that's right?
I'm thinking of, well, it went from, from 3 to, it's somewhere in between there. It's somewhere in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm asking that question because I feel like all of that needs to be corrected. It's still unclear to me. I don't know if someone else has the answer, but that needs to be defined. What are we doing?
Well, my standpoint, I thought we was going to move the existing commission over underneath boards and commission. I'm not for the whole interview process. I do think all resumes or letters of interest need to be presented to the council so you can know who's sitting on this board there. But I'm up in the air whether we split it off where the mayor have appointment and the council have appointments also on that too. I would just refer to whatever the committee desires to do.
Which is planning and development, or it's in our committee. Okay.
Yeah. But I don't want to politic this thing at the same time,
Right.
because we can get into that very easily. That's why I want the existing board appointed to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I do understand that, we need the administration, and I would use the word administration because Mayor Prince is there now. We don't know who will be there later. To initiate these projects, you need the administration to make sure that you use the CBA also. So I don't want to just make it seem like the administration is irrelevant, because you can easily, the administration say, I'm not going to enforce it too at the same time. So you have to look at that standpoint also. Is there any other discussion by any council members on that? Okay. At this time, I will ask that it will be that the entire board be appointed as is. And there is a new seat there, and I will ask that the mayor at this time be the one to make that appointment to the extra person. But going forward, I will ask that it be split off to the 12-5 going forward.
Okay.
To keep the consistency in what we have now.
And I guess my question is, what's our reasoning behind it? I think that this is something closer to the people. And I think we are the closest to the people. And so these kind of weird breakdowns, and we know how hard it is to find people. And 17 is already a large number. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess we can deal with that when we get there. I know we had talked about making it exclusively council appointed at our last committee meeting. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Okay. Well, my only thing was I don't want to get to the point where, the mayor doesn't want to go ahead and use the CBA and he's rescinding the CBA and not enforcing it.
Well, that's our job to make sure that it is enforced, and we just repeal the tax abatement.
Good point. Okay. Well, if it's something that we need to come back and revisit, we can.
Are you looking for comments or right now it's just the council?
Right now it's just the council right
okay.
now.
All right.
I would just like to come back to that portion there. I know there's a lot of other also from the attorney, Paul have sent, and I'd like to go to those amendments at this time.
Okay, so we have, you know, in looking at kind of what the purpose was in trying to clarify some of the issues that we had with the original the CBA ordinance, there were a number of things that that were somewhat ambiguous or somewhat overly broad and vague, which leads to, as any probably developer will tell you, or administration that's trying to enforce this, a major headache is as to what the unknown is, and also a lot of bureaucratic red tape that can really bog down any type of progress. As the councils and the public is, I'm sure, aware of, redeveloping and bringing some growth to the city of Gary that has a tax reclamation that is just absolutely dwarfed by the surrounding communities. The CBA definitely impacts how the future of development will happen in the city of Gary. Some things about it are great. Some things about it are, given the overly broad aspects of it, it can be really a deterrent for developers to even approach the city. So, for example, as is the ordinance originally stated that pretty much any benefit that was bestowed upon the city to any developer would essentially result in having to go through the CBA process, all of the meetings, the filings, the mailings, the certified mailings to the census tract, a lot of these things that would make the benefit probably worthless in the end. So, for example, if you have a business that's operating in the city of Gary that is being bestowed a piece of property that the city owns next to it that's relatively worthless, that the city has been having a hard time keeping up with the maintenance of, the property may be worth, what the back taxes are on it, or what the back taxes were on it at the time that the city acquired it. By the way that the council or that the ordinance was written, it would essentially make it to where that the bestowing of that property would have to go through the CBA process. So something that may be worth hardly anything has to go through that process, which makes it, you have businesses that may look at, hey, we'd like to add on to what we're, what we already actually at, operating at. We'd like this piece of property next to it. Well, if we're going to have to enforce this as is, it makes it to where it's okay. Well, then you have to go through the CBA process because you received that land. Land may be worth $2,000, but here we go. So in looking at some of the other communities that do have CBAs in the nation, obviously, as Councilman Godwin had astutely pointed out, there are none in Indiana. Like, for example, Detroit's, there are a threshold. And so with the amendments to the CBA, we're looking at establishing a threshold for at which point the CBA would take effect. In this instance, the identified benefit threshold would be $1 million. So something that, a project that would either receive a tax abatement or a land transfer or any other abatement as identified, that was in a value in the excess of $1 million would then trigger the CBA ordinance and the requirements therein. So that's one of the main changes. Some of the other changes that are included here are the let's see, just going through this, ensuring that the community benefits definition was clarified, and that in that it's defined as a benefit provided or created on behalf of the city of Gary or its citizens by a developer in exchange for a city issued benefit, which includes but not limited to donations to or improvements or creation / maintenance of parks, schools, affordable or mixed income housing, incubation of businesses owned by Gary residents, minorities, particularly African Americans, and female-owned businesses. And then there's a clarification that this would not include the pass-through funds. So, for example, home funds or CDBG funds, which those are bestowed from the federal government. Those are not benefits that are coming directly from the city of Gary. In addition to that, some of the other amendments to the ordinance include, let's see, for some of the substances. So the impact area was another issue. And we've had Broadway lofts earlier on today, and I think that that's probably one of the best examples of why we would, when in looking at the situation with Broadway lofts, for example, why updating or amending this ordinance was important. Where Broadway loft sits, it sits basically in the southwest corner of a census tract. So it's on 7th and Broadway, and that is that bottom corner of that census tract. Now the impact area then would reach all the way out to to the Etna area from 7th and Broadway, and deep into the Etna area. Whereas directly across the street, you have directly across the street from Broadway would not be in that impact area. And so defining it by the census tract seemed to be for that reason kind of unfair to the surrounding area or the immediate area. And in addition to that, it seemingly is a very, very burdensome way of trying to handle, like, for example, the mailings that are required, the notice that has to go out. There are going to be certain census tracts that are going to have thousands and thousands and thousands of mailings that have to go out at a couple bucks a pop, and that becomes a very, very burdensome aspect for a developer in looking at these situations. So we're kind of looking at it like, well, what is already the common practice? What is some of the common practice? So for example, if you had somebody that was coming in and it was going to impact, a developer that was going to impact the area, what we use now is actually more than what the state requires, which is a 300-foot radius for any land use changes or any variances or anything of that nature. So that was seemingly much more fair to the area that's going to be the most impacted, directly impacted by the development. So we proposed, this is a practice that we already have instituted. It's a practice that works well. It's a practice we're all familiar with. We did not work in census tract before, and again, it didn't seem fair to the immediately adjacent properties. So, particularly those that, and that's what you're going to see. I mean, a lot of the census tracts, a lot of the development are going to be on the borders of that because they're divided by a lot of main roads. So you're going to have a census tract that's off. I think there's one that divides Ridge Road. So some on the north side and south side are going to be affected differently, despite the fact that they're right across the street. Obviously, Broadway is a major census tract division. So it just the census tract it doesn't seemingly work as well. So that was one of the changes that we had changed. Section 2. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So you're looking to change that to the 300-foot radius?
400 foot. The city actually does. Yeah, the city, we do 400 foot in our ordinance, which is already more than what the state requires. So yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So section 3, I'm going to skip over section 2 because I think we've already covered that pretty well. Section 3 was the applicability. So this is we had earlier on we had hit the definition section for the community benefits. This is the actual section where it talks about the applicability, and this is where it defines it as that $1 million. Going on to section 4, under this section, what was redefined here, or I should say amended here, was the reinvestment. So here it states, any CBA applicable development that receives an applicable city issued benefit agrees to invest up to 15% of the total value of that benefit in the community benefits as defined in the ordinance, as agreed to or in writing by our city representative and the CBA, minus any amount agreed to as part of the imposed fee per Indiana code. And that's essentially that's a tax abatement section. So in looking at this, the reinvestment section, as is, you would have 15% that was reinvested per the CBA, and then an additional 15% if there was a tax abatement that was involved. So you're taking 30% of the you're taking essentially 30% of that benefit before, right off the bat, which is ultimately going to be a situation where then the city is likely we're going to have to over incentivize developers to make up for that. So in looking at the 15%, it seemed like that number was awfully familiar. And it's seemingly like, I know that a lot of this language was taken from other community CBAs. And so in looking at that 15%, it kind of made sense. Well, maybe this was meant as more of a cap at 15%, where you're going to have 15%, it can be a mixture of either, some part of it being the imposed fee per the tax abatement, or it could be 15, or 15% of the CBA, or a portion of it to make up to that 15%. I'm sorry, I'm explaining this the wrong way, but essentially 15%, that 15% cap being made up of some combination of that as decided both by the CBA and the council. So that was one of the changes. Then in addition to that, the total value of the benefit, that is defined there as well. So that was, and it was previously not very well, it wasn't defined really. So the total value of the benefit as received by a development shall consist of the following sum: the total reduction in land, value, or the value of the land transferred as reported by the redevelopment department, the total tax abatement value over the life of the abatement as reported by the redevelopment department, the total value of grants received by the development on behalf of the city of Gary, and any other benefit received and enjoyed solely by the development from the city of Gary that can be valued by a professional metric on behalf of the CBA. So that last section is kind of a catch-all where, if there is some other unforeseen type of benefit that is being bestowed, that there is some way to value that, then that would be included as well. The deposit and control of reinvestment funds. So this was a section. This section was included to kind of define where those funds go and how they were going to be handled. So in this section, it states that the reinvestment funds described in this ordinance shall be deposited and directed to either the general fund or the Economic Development Corporation Fund, and shall be specifically for the purposes of proposed by the CBA and approved by the council. The administration does have an amendment to this amendment. What we were proposing was that it would read, instead of the general fund or the Economic Development Corporation Fund, it seemed to narrow it a little bit too much. What we were proposing was that it would be directed to a non-reverting fund that shall be used specifically for the purposes proposed by the CBA or CCBA and approved by the Gary Common Council. And the reason for that amendment would be, you're going to have certain projects where there's going to be, there's reinvestment funds that come in, and there may be a specific idea as to how those need to be used. So putting it in in a non-reverting fund where that fund would be either established or maybe an existing fund that is already there, it would ensure, one, that those funds got used for the purpose that the CCBA had decided and the council had approved. But it wouldn't require an amendment to the general fund or the Economic Development Corporation, it wouldn't require an amendment to the ordinance in order to use a different fund other than those designated there. So that would be the proposed amendment to the amendment from the administration. The local hiring section that was amended. The way that it was written, it just didn't seem very, I think that this was made it a little bit more clear, and basically as it reads now, it says all the CBA applicable developments agree to follow the City of Gary's local hiring ordinance applicable at the time of hiring employees for the project's construction and any jobs available following the completion of construction. Because as it was written, was kind of a little bit vague and questionably enforceable. The living wage section, that was not really, that portions remained the same. It just clarifies, basically throughout a lot of the portions here that are amended, it takes the wordiness of any developer that receives any city issue benefit to all CBA applicable developments. That way it makes it a little bit more clear. Then under, let's see, the notice of public hearing section that was changed. That, I mean, it basically just included that, you know, when the notices go out, that it may state both, it would clarify that it could have both public meetings included in that notice. And then it changed it from 14 days to 10 days, and that's just in compliance with the common practice. It's typically 10 days by state statute, and 14 days, you know, it was one of those things where we wanted to make sure that we were using what was the common practice, and it wasn't going to be something that somebody was going to be thrown off by, because it's, you know, these follow kind of the same. It's very, very similar to how the tax abatement process works, which is the 10-day notice as well. Let's see. Other than that, the section 6 is amended. That was amended to include the or to kind of clarify what was going to be included in the initial community benefits report as opposed to the subsequent ones. It just, you know, I think they're very minor as far as how it's clarified. Now it just reads that annually by the second council meeting in April, the annual report shall be prepared by the compliance officer and submitted via the redevelopment department. Let's see. Then the compliance section, before it stated that any development that it had exceeded the $5 million mark would, you know, any development that was that exceeded $5 million, they would fund one compliance officer, and in addition to any employees working for the city at the time of the CBA applicable development through a grant. So that was essentially just stated where just all compliance would be paid for solely by the developer, and that's it.
A lot of changes.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely some changes. I think, you know, like as I'd stated, there was definitely some, you know, some concern how we were either A, going to enforce this, and B, you know, the impact that was going to ultimately have on our on the city's hopes for creating some opportunities for development in the city of Gary.
Now, my question now is, by hearing that no one else has a CBA, what does this do with the competition that's right around us? I mean,
well,
we're surrounded by competition.
I'll put it this way. As written, our worry would be that ultimately the city of Gary would lose a lot of developers to Hammond, East Chicago, Hobart, places where there is room for development. There is opportunity for development. From the city standpoint, the reason for a lot of these, let us be clear, the administration is very, very aware of the history of a lot of prior projects, you know, making promises and not following through on them. We're aware that it's not as if we're not aware that these things have occurred in the past. And we agree that you know, this is something that is needed. There needs to be some sort of, you know, there needs to be some sort of oversight to ensure that, hey, you know, if we are going to provide you with the benefit, you know, particularly substantial benefit, we need to make sure that, you know, it's not going to go out the window as soon as construction is completed or as soon as ground is broken. It's absolutely true, but there is a serious concern that we would see a lot of projects that would ultimately, and we've heard rumors that this has been, you know, talked about amongst the developers that were interested, and has specifically stated, well, you know, we just simply couldn't comply with that. We'll just have to take our business elsewhere. Which, you know, in looking at the situation, for example, the idea of, you know, capping it at a 15%, I mean, you know, if we leave it at 30%, what's 30% of zero? I mean, that's, I think the bottom line is that what we're looking at is that there could be, given the fact that there's nothing like that, it does leave us in a situation where we are putting this out there very, very, you know, very abruptly, and that ultimately that could lead to a serious loss of opportunity for business in the city of Gary. Mind you, this isn't something, you know, we're enacting, you know, we would be enacting this amendment now. However, there's nothing to state that we couldn't later on go ahead and amend it to include a higher or a lower threshold or a higher a higher reinvestment amount. I think the city's fear at this point now, though, is that 30%, that 30% number is very, very high. The threshold is there is none, and that there's going to be businesses that are going to say, yeah, I can't comply with this stuff. So,
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Godwin.
So I guess I have a comment and a question. I certainly, this is part of my world. I understand when people are looking at competitive advantage around real estate development opportunities, but I would question our value proposition vis-a-vis those cities that were named. I mean, we know that the amount of real estate that we have, especially potentially and currently contiguous real estate, and the price and value of that real estate presents an option, an opportunity that's far different than what Hammond, East Chicago, and others have to offer. Because we know their land costs a whole lot more, and we know they don't have as much of it that is as widely available as we do. So I do think it's still, even with these requirements, we still present an awesome value that with some modifications, I do get that the 30% is a lot. There's no doubt about that, and I think we do need to reduce that, but I wouldn't just shy away from having some percentage, because let's not let these developers fool us. They can't in any way do what they're seeking to do here in those other cities at the same cost.
Yeah, and if I could respond, Mr. Chair, just briefly, I would always defer to the successful real estate agent before. I am not a real estate agent. I'm sure Mr. Godwin has a lot better of an idea of what commercial real estate goes for, the availability of said real estate. I do, and just to respond to that, the idea that we're moving it to zero. We're not moving it to zero. We're leaving it at 15. It's just ensuring that 15% is an amount that's going to be reflected in tangent with the imposed fee, that we're not going to use both the imposed fee of 15% of any tax abatement, and then in addition to that, another 15%. And which ultimately that is what the purpose of the imposed fee was to begin with by the state statute, that 15% from the tax abatement that gets reverted back to the city. The intention of that is for community development, community benefit. So what it is ensuring is that, that fee is getting used for that the CBA has, or the CCBA has a say in that, how that's going to be proposed to the council as to how those funds would be used. So it does ensure that there is going to be there is going to be that reinvestment, and there is going to be that percentage. But yes, it's at the same time, we do know that while we have seen certain businesses, even before this, we've seen certain businesses that have left Gary and gone to Hammond. And we know that there have been certain declarations by other communities that they would take businesses from the city of Gary if they could. And that's something that we also have to be cognizant of as the administration. In looking out for our community, we have to also make sure that there is at least the opportunity here, and that we have at least people coming to the table.
Is there any other questions, council members, at this time?
I would just, as it pertains to this particular, or I should say, as this amendment would pertain to the test, if you will, the Broadway lofts, is it prohibitive for them? That is to say, is the CBA in its current form cost prohibitive to Broadway lofts?
In its current form, I'm certain it would be. I think as Mr. Schweigerhart had just stated, I think they had run into a little bit of financial trouble. They're up against a deadline. But all that aside, they had the idea of the 15% fee imposed, and then in addition to that, another 15%, making it 30%. That they were really not even, again, they're in phase one. None of that 30% was not a part of that calculation. I'm sure that if the full effect of the CBA as applied now, it would be pretty detrimental to them, without question, I'm sure. I don't know if he's still on.
I know that on the imposed fee, which is statutorily possible, right? It's up to 15%. Is that also the case for the CBGA? Refresh my memory.
Under the,
Is it
under,
up to or 15%?
that's a great question. Under the state statute?
No,
Or
I'm
is
talking
it,
about for the CBGA.
oh, under the yeah, under the CBA, hold on, let me check. I think it just stated 15%, but let me go back to that, the reinvestment section. Yeah, it's up, it was, no, I'm sorry. Originally it was 15%, and then it we had included, in the amendment was up to 15%.
And who would decide what up to means? Obviously, the council, given the statute, would be able to decide the imposed fee. And I suppose it will be the same for this, right?
Yeah,
So we would
absolutely.
need some flexibility on a case-by-case basis to look at the economics of each transaction and determine what that up to should be as it relates to the interest of the city and the interest of the development going forward.
That's correct. So what we have right now is, you know, as it's written, it would be the up to 15%, and then and it's the same thing, I believe, for the state stat, you know, the imposed fee with the state statute as well. So I mean, I would tend to agree. I would state that I think that ensuring that we're not going to, and I guess that becomes kind of the question when you're dealing with developers, whether or not they're willing to, you know, really start to engage that if they know that ultimately 30%, they could get hit with 30% as soon as they, you know, at some point, you know, it could get all the way through this process, you know, because that's the other part of it is the approval process doesn't happen by the council until the very end. So they could go through all of this. They can go through 8 months or, you know, however long it would take to go through that phase 1 process, have all the council meet or have all the public meetings, end up at the council say, hey, you know, we're going to impose the full 30 here. That may be a risk that they may say, hey, I don't want to take that. I mean, if I know that I'm in for, you know, 15%, and that's going to be, you know, that's going to essentially what I was already accounted for because I was getting this abatement, you know, and now it's that, however that's divided, it's basically taking that and saying, okay, this is how this is ultimately going to be devised from here on out, as it's decided by the CBA and the council. That may be a little bit more of a outcome determinative variable that the developer has to, or, you know, would rather work with. I'm not, yeah, I'm assuming that's why, so.
Is it possible to have some kind of pre-clearance type of resolution? So for example, when a developer comes, when you're working with them in redevelopment or whatever the avenue is, that once at the beginning stages of the deal, that they would basically, you look at the economics, come to the council and seek a resolution on what those fees would be, sort of on the early stages, so that they would have some sense of, okay, we would look at how large is this deal? Are we talking $100 million or are we talking $1 million? Because obviously the larger the assessed valuation savings, the implications of the percentage mean different things, right? So could we do some kind of pre-clearance resolution process whereby they would, in the early stages, get that, and we would sort of, in good faith, not I guess by ordinance, but in good faith, we would hold to that absent some significant changes in what's being proposed or what's ultimately proposed to the council.
I mean, it's possible. Again, we're in uncharted territory here. Like as we stated, I mean, there is no other CBA in the state. So and again, I mean, that may be something that we could see how that would work. But I would suggest, and I think from the administration side, to start with this process, you know, as laid out, and then, you know, if it gets, I mean, I think if that became kind of a something that the council saw was of value as we went on, I think that might be something that could be amended to the ordinance that says, hey, you know what, we should do this resolution that's kind of this gatekeeper, you know, ahead of it, so you know, we can, look at this ordinance and say, okay, well, hey, with some of these projects, we want to go above the 15%. And that's kind of what I had stated earlier, that, that this isn't as, we all know that these ordinances can be amended. So in the event that, there are developers that begin to really start to take interest in the city, that start to bring bigger projects that do have that flexibility, or that don't have that, that profit, that very slim profit margin. Like, for example, Broadway Lofts, I'm assuming, does have a slim profit margin, as opposed to, some of the larger projects that we could end up seeing come to the city of Gary. At that point, having that flexibility, from the council standpoint, I think that could be a good idea.
Let me be clear on this one, and I don't want to hold up a lot of time, but on this one, what we're looking at now is that if we don't change the CBA as it is, then it will be a 30% cost to Broadway Lofts development for the amount of savings they have under the tax abatement, basically. Because we don't have the up to language. And even if we did, we would have to specify in the confirmatory resolution, I suppose, what the exact percentage would be. Okay.
That's correct.
I will just say that that's probably, of all the changes you listed, that seems to be the most pertinent and relevant. I think a lot of that other stuff is stuff we probably need to joggle around and think more about. So I would support some kind of up to, and we can talk about what that specific number is, because obviously it would need to be inserted into the confirmatory resolution. But that's all I have to say about it.
Now, you asked about it being inserted to a confirmatory resolution. It's the CBA. Now, that question hasn't been answered. It's a CBA. Can it be applied at this time? Because I keep hearing through the developer that the CBA was not in place. So I want to make sure we're hearing two different things going on.
So to answer that, it's actually kind of, it would be a novel issue at this point, because technically the benefit has not been bestowed. And the way that the CBA applies is that it, at any point after the passage of the CBA, any benefit to the city of Gary would be required to follow this. Mind you, that would be something that would, the intention of that was, from the ground up, because the way that this ordinance reads, there's so much of this, that involves a planning process, public meetings, all of these other things, that when you had a project that was as advanced as Broadway Lofts in their process, it was kind of a last minute, hey, you guys are now applying for this tax abatement after, doing all this planning with the city for several years ahead of time. On top of that, here's a 30, you're going to get 30% of your benefit that we were going to be proposing to you cut. Now, that said, there is flexibility in the ordinance that allows for, both the common council and the executives of the city to exempt any of the terms of development or any of the development from the terms of the CBA. So I mean, there is that flexibility that the council and the executive both have, if it's deemed to be in the best interest of the city. Obviously, from our standpoint, losing any development, particularly this late in the game, would not be in the best interest of the city. So,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, and I'm no math person at all. I barely. I can understand basic numbers, but economics sometimes gets beyond me. But let me ask you this. So, for example, right now it's a 75% tax abatement, correct?
Yes, over the last.
So
yes.
Let's just say it was a 100% tax abatement,
Mhm.
and it was 30% of a 100% tax abatement. Would that mathematically be the same, or at the very least less painful for a developer? Right. So if my tax savings, I'm making this up, is 100,000, and well, let's say I'm saving 100,000, or let me see if I'm saying this right. If the 75% abatement is a $100,000 savings, I got to pay $30,000, right? If we're saying 15 plus 15%, right? 30% total.
Mhm.
But I guess if I get a larger tax abatement, I'm saving some of that on the tax end. Even if I still have to pay the same 30%, I'm not paying 100%, right, of whatever the amount is that I'm saving. I'm explaining this in a very complicated way, but do you get what I'm saying? If you increase the amount of the tax abatement to a higher number, and we're not saying that you have to give 100%, right, of whatever the savings is, but it's the same 30%, isn't that less painful since there's greater property tax savings to the entity? Does that make any sense?
It does, but I mean, I don't think that, I mean, I think that at what cost to the remainder of the city then? I mean, if you're doing 100% tax abatement, and then you're directing it, you're directing those funds, you're taking 30% of that, and you're trying to come up with the same number, that's essentially taking money that 25, and my assumption is that you're saying just go ahead and over incentivize in order to make up for that 30%.
Because we're going to get the money anyway, right? So what I'm saying is we're going to get, right now we would get, let's say if we didn't do an imposed fee, if we waive the imposed fee and we get rid of the 15% for the CBGA, right? That's 30% we're not going to get anyway, right? And absent this, if we didn't have a CBA ordinance, we wouldn't be getting it. We might get the 15% imposed.
Yeah, you get the 15% imposed fee. Absolutely.
15% we wouldn't be getting. But I guess the other part of that is, as it relates to, and we should not make legislation based on one particular deal, because every deal is going to be different.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
this is our test case. This is the one that's before us. And what I'm thinking is that, we're not going to get any tax revenue anyway, because we've already said it's in a TIF, right? So if we make it 100% savings, it's not as though we're eliminating dollars we would have otherwise gotten, right?
Hold on.
Isn't that what we said earlier? And by the way, I want to commend you, Mr. Pohl, because we're asking a lot of a lawyer. Your job is not to explain TIFs and economic development, tax management. You're supposed to just be a good draftsman.
Yeah, well, it's I
don't know whether Mr. Bittner or others want to help you out, because this is a lot of pressure for a lawyer. And I guess from one lawyer to another, I have some mercy.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand conceptually, what you're asking. And I guess, really at the end of the day, I think ultimately what it seems like what we would be doing is transferring money that would essentially go to us from, into the general fund as tax reclamation. And then instead of it going to that, we're essentially qualifying that and putting that directly to into the CBA, to where it was simply into the under this ordinance, or even as what it was written, it would be a specific fund for a specific purpose, which I don't know if that's in the best interest of the city, given the fact that, I mean, taking that the amount that would be reclaimed and using it as needed throughout the rest of the city. I guess that's kind of, I think, what would be the issue that you would be running into, if I'm understanding what your question is correctly. I mean, I guess that would be my concern with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and again, every deal is going to be unique.
Yeah.
Which is why I really think, if possible, and again, I'm no scholar of how this works, but I think we should really look at that, because I understand, right? But this is a very competitive process. It's very quick. The world is people's oyster, right? I mean, we know that there's a lot of dollars flowing around. There's a lot of opportunities for people. So we don't want to create something that's overly onerous, nor do we want to have something that's unpredictable. Because believe it or not, developers are not the devil, right? We do want development in our city, and it takes capital and risk to do that. And so we want to make the process obviously beneficial to the city, which is why I support community benefits. But we also don't want to make it so complicated that people just say, I'll keep moving. It's not worth my time. I do think we have an incredible value proposition, period, incomparable. There's nowhere you can buy this much land at the low fees that we charge, nor are our zoning and other required fees anywhere comparable to some of the other big opportunities that are available. But I think we should really look at a process whereby in the early stages, there's some kind of resolution that this council agrees to absent some significant changes, that is, if we're going to say up to 15%, it may be the case we say, look, it's going to be 5% for the imposed fee and 5% for the CBGA. We do that on a case-by-case analysis. We engage the CBGA committee. We look at the economics of the deal. We look at the competitive, the environment, right? And so we don't want to lose a deal, but we have to be fast. But I think if we can assure developers up front that this is what we're agreeing to with the CBGA committee and ultimately the council, really, well, we would listen to their recommendation, but ultimately we would have to make a decision. Then it clears the way for you all to negotiate and discuss for the next 6 months, the next 6 years, right? Before it actually happens and comes before us in the form of a tax abatement. I don't know what that, how that works legally necessarily, but I think it would certainly help, even if it's an MOU between the council and the developer, so that people know what they're getting. Because you're right on. No one should come to this stage of the process and find out they have a new 30% obligation. That's significant.
And absolutely, and I think we're saying the exact same thing. There's got to be some outcome determinative, and I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think the idea of having some sort of some sort of understanding up front is, that's much more alluring to a developer who has to plan all of these things out months and years ahead of time, as opposed to, okay, go through this process and then see what happens at the end of it. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's got to be something that a developer is going to take into effect or take into an account when they're making that determination. I do think that, having a specified cap on how much that would be, or what the maximum amount would be, would also be, would be beneficial as well. Because then that lets, just lets developers know ahead of time, that they're, that their interest, where they're at, where that interest lies, and what they can work with before even proposing it. So, and I think that's what we've done with the amendment as far as the reinvestment section of that.
We got a lot of work to do between now and the council meeting. That's all I'm going to say. We
got a lot of
have power, but there's a lot going on. But I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Mr. Bidner, you want to add something to the conversation here?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to, kind of chime in on, some of the basic math, which, certainly I get the question that Councilman Godwin was asking as far as the 100 versus 75, based on the cap of the 15% imposed fee, versus, say like a 30%, overall split based on the way that it's currently constituted. And based on the imposed fee, we wouldn't be able to go above that 15% if we went up to 100. So it'd just take it back down to 85, and it'd be a different benefit, not necessarily something that, as Dan Bowditch alluded to earlier, where it's the fee being specifically paid through their payment of taxes. However, part of all of this is, and the council's seen in previous deals where if there's a tax abatement or if there's a TIF bond issued, I mean, I think the best example that's most current is the U.S. Steel deal, where it was a development agreement that was agreed upon both by the Redevelopment Commission as well as the City Council, and that constituted what, in effect was the $20 million payment directly to the city last year, as well as a continued benefit to the city anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the excess of proceeds from the assessed valuation. So we already have the ability to enter in development agreements that don't necessarily apply directly to a tax abatement. That's a separate, and distinct approval that is gone through. And really what it comes down to, on that front is, so we have tools in the toolbox as far as absent of a community benefit ordinance already to, do a lot of what we're discussing here. But one of the things that, we need to be mindful of is, as both Attorney Pohl and Councilman Godwin talked about, the predictability of the process itself. And in a lot of cases, the negotiation is ongoing, as the councilman alluded to, for multiple years. And I think one way to kind of help ease the concerns of both the community benefit groups as well as the council, if there is a agreement as far as what that imposed fee or what the direct benefit would be on the front end, determining that as a percentage of the overall, benefits that may be given the city, then allows to continue on negotiating the overall larger deal. But the community benefits group, as well as the council, knowing what that percentage is based on what the overall investment is going to be. And as a city, we can continue to plan as far as what types of projects we're even willing to incentivize generally, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial, and having policies in place as far as what we expect those thresholds to be, generally speaking, in advance, just talking generally. And that way, when an industrial user with its, let's say, $100 million worth of investment, what they can expect the thresholds to be, or if it's a single family residential developer, what we expect those, thresholds to be in that case. So that way, at least there's some basic parameters that were agreed upon, between the administration, the council, and the community, of what we're looking at in that regard, so that we can start a conversation from there to provide that framework, rather than, as each deal is individual. At least we know we have a starting point, and developers and the community know reasonably what their expectations are on both sides.
Okay.
So I just would, if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I don't want to create any homework for Mr. Bittner, but I would be curious about, so Mr. Walker, Attorney Walker, whom I have great respect for, says that this ordinance tells the world or developers that the city of Gary is not basically a good place to do business, that we're not business friendly. And I'd be curious if we were to look at the last 3-5 deals that were done, obviously without a CBA in place, if we were to go back and look at those deals and see how the math would have been different. So if we had a 30%, I think, let me be clear, 30% is too much, right? I don't, it's way too much. I get that. But what would that have looked like to a TMB tube, to an Alliance Steel, et cetera? And would they have walked, right? Would they have gone elsewhere? What were the options they were looking at? So let's just do, again, I don't want to rush. I don't mind dealing with this specific issue and having the up to as it relates to right now. But I think this is a conversation we need to continue.
Absolutely.
And I would love to actually have a meeting, can be open to the public. I don't want to get in trouble with Councilman Lay, our open door subcommittee chair. But I would love to have a meeting where we talk to the CEOs of TMB Tube, of Alliance Steel, of the variety of companies that have moved here. And I want to have that conversation with folks in the CBA to talk about, okay, what do these numbers look like? What were the other cities you were looking at? Would you have walked had these requirements been made for you? Or, was our space $1 million cheaper, right? So it didn't really matter to you about whether we had 30% because you couldn't afford to go somewhere else. Or were our labor costs a lot different, or our workman's compensation very different if you're comparing us with Illinois? Or did Hammond or Holborn not really have the space for what you wanted to do? So I would love for us to really do a deep dive analysis, because this conversation is obviously going to continue, on what this looks like. And I think it will help our efforts even beyond this particular amendment to the ordinance, just to know sort of where do we stand in the marketplace? What's our value proposition to businesses who are currently here to stay, because they can leave, even the ones who are already here, as well as how do we get new businesses? And I think that's a good conversation for the council, for members of the CBA committee, and even the business people and the administration to all collectively talk about. We have a very open, frank conversation about the political economy, right, of what it is that we're doing. So I've talked way too much, but thank you.
Any other council members with any other comment? Okay, I'll have it open at this time for members of the CBA at this time. Carolyn, you're muted. You're trying to speak. Carolyn, you're muted. Can't hear you. You're muted. You're still muted, Carolyn, from your computer. Okay, you're unmuted now. But we still can't hear you. No, we're still not getting any sound from you. I'm gonna have to ask, while Carolyn trying to get her sound to come through, any other member from the CBA?
This is Councilwoman Atkins. Just a suggestion. Carolyn, why don't you go out the meeting and come back in and see if that'll adjust your sound?
Yeah, Mr. Brewer, Councilman Brewer.
Yes.
Hi, I want to speak. I am a part of the CBA committee. There were some characterizations that I think maybe needs to be clarified just a little bit. The being that, excuse me. The first one being that the CBA in its current form, well, first, my name is Roman Bronson. I'm the Northwest Indiana area director for the Indiana Plan. It is the only construction awareness program endorsed by the Northwest Indiana Building Trades as well as the Construction Advancement Foundation. We've been in this community for around 25 years. I'm sure a lot of people on this call is familiar with it. I am the new director for the past roughly two and a half years. So just want to speak on some of the characterizations that Councilman Lay said about the committee. One is that the overall spirit of the committee is to increase, I guess, transparency in the process of development in the Gary area. Is not to usurp any of the duly elected powers of the council, as explained by Mr. Pohl. Attorney Pohl Esquire, that ultimately, if this is not seen as productive for the city of Gary, that the council can always just disengage a developer from this process. The only part that really we would be in charge of, or that we would have the only part that we would directly be involved in is the MOU that at this point is still up in the air. It was providing some funds that we were hoping to directly provide to the Gary Career Center to start some of those processes of training individuals to take advantage of some of these opportunities within the construction area. Why is that important is Mr. Pete has been very transparent in his dealings. As far as what else he's reached out to us, talked to Carolyn, etc. But something that isn't even attached to CBA is, how do you plan on getting Gary residents? Unless he's made substantial, unless he's made some substantial progress in those areas over the last maybe say 2 to 3 weeks that I've spoken to him, it was not very clear how he was going to get Gary residents involved on this project. The other thing that is an issue is also vendors and suppliers. It's still been very vague as far as who will be these contractors, who will be these vendors, these suppliers, and what way does Gary residents directly benefit from this. So I do understand difficulties in enacting this legislation. We tried in very good faith to deal with the prior administration to get these issues resolved. At the time, Mayor Karen was actually directly involved in writing the CBA. She proposed her own amendments. She actually changed it in certain ways to help make it more enforceable. So even though obviously there may be issues that need to be looked at, as I see that you all are doing, I don't want the rhetoric and the politics of it to overshadow what we're really trying to do. We all are civically minded individuals that came together to try our best to increase opportunities for Gary residents. And I would say, as far as my knowledge, I'm the only one that's currently not living within Gary, but I've grown up in Gary. I was educated at Emerson High School. I went to IUN. I currently don't live in Gary because of and as far as endorsed, I'm also a union official. I'm part of Electricians International Brotherhood.
We're losing you a little bit.
697. So we do have a number of people and making this happen, making more opportunities. Okay, I do apologize. My phone is getting low as long as it has, so I do apologize. But just I want to make sure that it's clear that we're not trying to usurp any duly elected individuals' powers in this. What we want to do is just be a part of the process. And if you look at the CBA, there's no point that we are directly influencing this process beyond the $100,000 that was previously, that Spectacle previously committed to this process.
Is there anyone else?
Councilman Brewer, may I speak?
Yes, Mr. Dillon. Attorney Dillon, how you doing?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to, I missed the last few meetings, but I wanted to clarify some things if they weren't clarified about the 501c4 status of the CBA. The CBA received 501c4 status in the winter of this year, late January, early spring. Ms. Carolyn McCready has received the letter. The issue of the letter had to do directly with COVID. And if you go on the IRS's website right now, on the 501c4 lookup, it says, hey, because of COVID-19, we are not reporting recently granted 501c4s or 501c3s. I did provide Attorney Godwin with a copy of the 1024A that we submitted, along with our budget, along with our operating agreement, along with all documents and everything, and including how the CBA at that time planned to spend every penny. And so as far as the 501c4 status, I would just say that I don't know what was said in previous meetings, but I would say that I did the legal work. I stand by the legal work. The 501c4 was completed correctly. Carolyn does have the letter saying that we are active, or that the group is active. As far as what happens with the CBA in the future, I'm not really speaking on that. But as far as the status, its legal status is a 501c4. It is a nonprofit corporation incorporated under the laws of the state of Indiana and recognized by the IRS under Section 501c4 as a nonprofit. And specifically, we went to 501c4 because we would be advocating on political issues. While that may not give people who donate to the group the best tax break for donation, it was the proper way to go because we are dealing in the political sphere, although we're not endorsing any candidates or anything like that. Because the topics are political that we would be advocating for, it's proper that we would be under a 501c4. That's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Can I ask two questions?
Yes.
And thank you, Attorney Dillon, for chiming in with that overview. It's very appreciated. One of the things that I do understand the ability to get a tax deduction for a charitable contribution is a big deal. And I do know that there are some provisions, and I'm not a nonprofit charitable organization expert, but there are some provisions whereby a certain percentage of contributions to 501c4s, I believe, you can have a mix, if you will, of 501c3 and 501c4, where a portion of the contributions can have that charitable status. Of course, you have to make sure that you designate how those funds are not commingled. and the ones that are sort of 501c3 eligible could be used, could be a tax deduction to the giver. And so maybe there's a way in which we can look at that. And I guess also, has the organization considered the possibility to partner with an organization like the Legacy Foundation? I know, for example, some of the organizations in Miller, like the Friends of Marquette Park, they're not a 501c3, but Legacy is. And so donations are run through Legacy Foundation on behalf of the work that Friends of charitable nonprofit work that Friends of Marquette Park does, but it allows givers to get the charitable contribution tax deduction. So I guess it's two questions. Can there be a mix for the 501c4? And secondly, is it possible for the entity to partner with a group like Legacy or the Urban League to get a sort of pass-through 501c3 charitable contribution ability or capacity? Thank you.
So, Mr. Godwin, let me ask a question today. But if the council is moving to put the CBA under the council, is the CBA, is the 501c4 even irrelevant at that time?
Well, I guess not. If we're saying, well, and I guess we should think about the whole thing, right? Because if we eliminate any funds coming to, if we do that, right? I guess currently we haven't, but if we do eliminate the 15% going to the CBGA, then there would be nothing going to it. The organization would simply it would not have that benefit that they were looking for. It would just be the up to 15% for the impact imposed fee rather.
Okay.
So
Mr.
I would
Dillon?
say, as far as the first question, as far as what portion could be deductible, the IRS provides that donations made to a 501c4 may be deductible if they are trade or business expenses in the ordinary and necessary to conduct business for the taxpayer's business. In this case, I believe that if a entity that wanted to get a benefit from the city of Gary that would fall under the CBA, that they would be able to do that, because in this case it would be a necessary business expense. If the statute or the ordinance stays in place, then it would be a necessary business expense. It would be something that an ordinance says that it's necessary for you to get this benefit. And so I believe that portion would absolutely be deductible, or at least a great deal of that money would be deductible under 501c4 as a trade or business expense in the ordinary course of business. As far as using an umbrella, I would absolutely think that any organization can use an umbrella. The 501c4 and 501c3 process, for that matter, is expensive. I mean, just off bat, the fees to get recognized are $650. That's not hiring any lawyers. That's not doing anything else. That's just what you pay the IRS. And you get professional services involved in that. It can be very expensive for a small organization. So a lot of organizations use umbrellas. And I think that the CBA could absolutely operate under an umbrella with the Legacy, but it would have to be very specific in that not in any advocacy. It could not use those funds for any advocacy. So right now, some of the funds that we would have gotten probably would have, actually, no, all of the funds were going to go, if you look at the budget, some were going to go to trade programs, some were going to go to the career center, and the rest, I think 5% or something that they were going to keep behind for incidental expenses. And I think as long as the money that would come through Legacy weren't used for advocating of the costs involved in advocating for an ordinance or against an ordinance or in that political sphere, and it would be used maybe for training or for job fairs or for some of the other things that the CBA saw itself doing to help the community, be ready to work. I think that could absolutely happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else at this time?
Yes, this is Councilman Brewer. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for this opportunity. I apologize if I've had to get up, but I'm in the midst of doing what I do, okay, in terms of my profession. But I just wanted to say this because I really was going to talk a lot about engagement to community engagement, because I would not be involved with any group that wasn't about building, embracing, enhancing the community, because that's all I've done since 1984. That's all I've worked in terms of engaging the community. Every organization, I've been the executive director of this or that organization, and it has all been about the community. So we don't want to take that from these agreements. We don't want to take that. That's why we've been involved. The building of the Indiana University project. It's all been about how can we work with the community so that the community can be enhanced, can be blessed, okay, so that people have jobs to enhance their family, help their community. That's all that we've been about. And we're a diverse group of people. I can just use, for instance, I belong to a church where we are very diverse in terms of every aspect, from doctors, lawyers, to nurses, to bus drivers, to all aspects, and also the aspect of people in need, because we do a lot of work in feeding the hungry every Saturday, except for during this pandemic, okay, right? But working with people who have addictions and things of that nature. So we've only been about enhancing the community, working with the community, developing strategies, business. Hey, we have business people. I'm in business. We're in business. We want our communities to strive, and the only way we can do that is that there is a continued wealth built in the community, and where people are making commitments to the community. So we are, when people challenge us about diverse, then I just say I don't know what they're looking for, because we've been at the council meeting, we've had interactions with past mayors, okay, city council person on strategic issues that enhance, not put money in individuals' pockets, but enhance our community. So that's what this community benefits agreement, and it could be a group that, in a sense, sets the standards for every community in terms of if you want something from the city, if you want some tax dollars situation, then shouldn't you do something for the community? We have a $400 million project just less than 5 minutes from where I live, okay? But how is it benefiting the expanded community? Yes, it's going to bring jobs when the casino is built, because right now the residents that are the people who are working on the project are not from Gary, Indiana, and you can go out there anytime you want. So we're talking about how we can get money, get growth in the hands of people that live in this community, who love this community, who go to church in this community, who shop in this community. That's what this agreement is about. So we hope that you all don't re-evaluate and reconfigure something that takes it out of the hands of the people. People are calling. These volunteers And we thank the attorney and the attorneys working with us, okay, because we understand that they are doing pro bono work because they want our community to be blessed and strive. So that's what this is all about. I typed up 3 pages, okay, of stuff, but I want to say this, that we are looking out how we can bless the people in the community, how when there are projects that come to the community, that the people in the community have a chance at these. We just sent off our neighbor's daughter, and what chance is she gonna have to come back to this community and work in this community? We want to create the opportunity for our young people to come back to this community and work. So I thank you. I could say more, but I thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Councilman Brewer, this is Doreen Carey. Hi. Can I
Hi.
just, I have a question since it's gone on so long and Carolyn hasn't had an opportunity to speak and Ms. McLeod had to leave apparently, and she was going to speak. So how can we continue to work with the council on any changes that you're considering? How can we continue to have input in this process before you make some final decisions?
Well, I was trying to have a meeting yesterday to have us to hash out some of these things there during that meeting, but with the storm that came through, that prohibited us from having that meeting. It sounds like we definitely would need to have another meeting because there's a lot of things that we need to really finalize and come to some agreements on. There's a lot of concern from the administration side where I can see those concerns also too. I would just say I would have to look and see what works best for the rest of my colleagues too. So that way we can continue these discussions there. And we have to give at least 48-hour notice to post have any type of public meeting. So I will have to let you all know what works best for us, and I can see what works best for you at the same time.
All right.
That very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else on with any other comments? I know we have been on for quite some time. There's a lot of things that's been covered thus far. There's a lot of things that we have to consider moving forward also too. And I don't think we're going to still wrap this up all in one night.
All right.
But we have seen some things been outlined from the administration side. You have heard some things outlined from the council side. And I think we need to formulate exactly which direction we're going to go. So it looks like this is going to be an additional amendment to the amendment that'll be put on the floor.
Excuse me, Mr. Brewer, may I, sorry, Councilman Brewer, may I just make one last statement?
Yes.
Before we close this time. Okay, thank you again.
May I ask who's speaking? Because coming up on the screen.
Thank you so much for the importance of this. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, the Indiana plan.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So I was just saying thank you again for chairing this meeting and getting these viewpoints out. I just want to be very quick in saying this. It's something that Mr. Councilperson Lee has said twice, as far as not wanting to continue any initiatives around getting people into union apprenticeships. I would say that myself, coming from Gary, I was not aware of union apprenticeships and all the benefits, et cetera. And it was through the efforts of past council people that created this program that I'm now a part of, the Indiana Plan. It directly was responsible for hiring a number of individuals that are now in positions that before it was not.
We're starting to lose pretty bad there.
Wasn't readily. It wasn't something. There are people now. I just want to make sure that even though the fight, not the fight, but even though that it may take a lot of effort and be labor intensive. I apologize. Okay, never mind. I just hope that we continue working towards getting people into apprenticeships.
All right. Yeah, yes.
That's all. A council person lay seem to. That's all I want to make sure I say. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
I know this is pretty difficult when we're really used to hashing out things and around each other, and sometimes it's kind of difficult when you're trying to do things virtually too at the same time. We'll be trying to use technology, but I will say I will try and get an additional meeting together before we have the third and final next Tuesday, and reach out to you all as soon as possible.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Thank
sorry about that, Kelly. I know you was having problems this evening, and hopefully we can get that resolved, because I know we have talked, and I know you have lots that you would like to share with us also too. But thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Like I said, I'll plan to have an additional meeting there to this further information, and we'll go from there. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you. Now.
All right.